What's up? Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I am Morrow, your storyteller for today, and I have a heap of RPG horror stories for us to cover. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Tale of the Unbearable Bear Druid and the DM's Girlfriend. I'm not sure if you used Unbearable with a bear as a pun, but if you did, Unbearable Bear. This incident happened a few years ago, but the memory of it is as fresh as dragon's breath, and almost as hot. Our group was made up of a fairly typical mix of RPG enthusiasts. There was me, a half-orc barbarian, Dave, the elven ranger, Hannah, dwarven cleric, and then there was Ted. Ted was a newcomer to our group, but seemed friendly enough. He was playing as a bear druid, which should have been a red flag in hindsight. Ted had a peculiar playstyle, to say the least. He was convinced that as a bear druid, he should be allowed to do whatever a bear could do, and I mean anything. He would interrupt the game, insisting he wanted to hibernate mid-battle, forage for berries in a dungeon, or mark his territory in every tree we passed. It was annoying, but at first, we all just laughed it off, thinking it was a bit of a good-natured role-playing. I'm assuming this behavior is going to devolve to become worse and worse and worse, and it looks like it's running the party's patience on thin ice. Enter the DM's girlfriend, Sarah. She joined the group a few sessions in, playing a human rogue. She was new to D&D, but eager to learn, and we were all more than happy to guide her along. It was good until Ted decided that his bear druid was attracted to Sarah's rogue. Now, in the spirit of the game, a bit of romance isn't necessarily a bad thing, but Ted took it to a whole new level. He started role-playing very uncomfortable interactions, insisting that his character was just acting like a bear. It got even worse when he attempted to court Sarah's rogue by bringing her dead rats, birds, and other presents in-game. Sarah, understandably, was uncomfortable and asked him to stop, but Ted insisted it was just his character. Oh, I hate that phrase, just his character. It's what my character would do. Sarah said stop, and you stop. No ifs, no ands, no bears, no buts, stop. It is time to cease doing what you're doing and stop. Things came to a head during one session where Ted's bear druid attempted to protect Sarah's rogue from an attacking goblin, causing a toward party wipe because he refused to attack, saying he was too busy guarding Sarah's character. After that, the DM had a serious talk with Ted about his behavior, and thankfully Ted agreed to dial it back, but the damage was already done. Sarah didn't return to the game, the group atmosphere was sour, and it took us quite some time to find a groove again. Well, really good advice to give to Teds is if somebody says stop, you stop. Ted, please don't do that again. If somebody tells you they don't like what you're doing, stop. And no more of like, it's what my character would do. If it's genuinely making another player in a room or in your virtual tabletop uncomfortable, you're making the person uncomfortable, not the character, the person. And it doesn't matter what your character is, what my character would do. If it's obnoxious to the player, you should probably stop. Or, hey, how about you adopt a different trait for it's what my character would do trait, right? Maybe something a little more noble, better, not creepy. Anyway, get to the next story. The It's About Me player I had. Hi, I am a DM that has been playing for over 3 years. This is a small rant / small stories about the many challenges me and my players were put through by our problem player. Problem player we shall call May. Major players, rogue, sorcerer, and bard. Problem player was a fighter. So the campaign has been going on for some time. The other players had already finished a small arc involving an insane druid when sorcerer said they had a friend who would love to join. I asked them to tell their friend to message me so I can see what they want to play and such. May messages me and is very polite and nice and wants to join in as a noble fighter, and as such had chosen to play a samurai fighter, and would not listen to me when I said the subclass had no impact on how characters should act. In the business we call this foreshadowing. In retrospect, I should have seen the red flags when May asked for their own custom-made class, which involved shouting at the enemy phrases that would trigger effects, and I quote, shouting, "I shall slay you for quadruple damage on the next attack." Quad damage by shouting at someone? Sign me up, I would love that, but that's a little bit too much, honestly. It's definitely not gonna get worse, right? This idea was immediately shot down, however. The demand would not end. May asked for custom background, custom race and custom magic items. I made the race and background because she desperately wanted to be a cannibalistic monster that used to be an executioner, because she had to kill 1,000 people to get back to the Feywild. More on that later. A cannibalistic executioner that had to kill 1,000 people to get back to the Feywild as a noble fighter that shouts at people? That's wild, but I'm interested. Please tell me more. Now, in the very first session this character was introduced, she made a flower crown while the other characters were shopping, and when Sorcerer refused to wear it, May responded by punching Sorcerer in the face. Funnily enough, the Sorcerer had more strength than the fighter and retaliated swiftly. Now, we all know this is not how a group of PCs should act. However, we granted her leeway because she was very new. May suggested me a couple of days after the session with her explanation as to why her character reacted with violence to the flower crown incident, something she'd made up after the fact, and asked if she could narrate her 2-page flashback at the start of the next session, or if I could do it. There was definitely salt when I pointed out the fact that this would serve no purpose except to make the other players feel bad, considering none of the other PCs would see this flashback. It's like being forced to just watch a cutscene, but like you're frozen in time T-posing while somebody else is having their own like little special moment. And like character moments are nice and all, but like May's character could spend a little bit of time talking to the player, the sorcerer, let's say for example, and maybe, I don't know, apologize for attacking them and then explain that they had some sort of trauma, you know, the general stuff. Discover each other's backstories through interaction and communication. Feels like when anime characters have a flashback, everything else just kind of freezes for like a split second while we have like a 10-minute segment of a flashback, so like the viewer can feel bad. Like other characters don't know about it. So what's the point for this? For many sessions after this, a couple of patterns started to emerge, such as stating, "I'm going to go ham" every time they used action surge, lying about how many times they had used action surge, forgetting to subtract damage, forgetting how many times the special ability for Samurai was used, constantly claiming to be the bravest at the tank of the group, but running away during a fight, and complain and nag at the bard while demanding they ran after her in order to heal, going so far as to refer to the bard as the medic, as well as the super cringy habit of saying "howdy partner" to any all new NPCs they met. This is not including doing rude gestures in real life to me, then claiming them to be from her homeworld and good things when someone commented on it. She would also speak German while using deep speech, even to me, which was very frustrating considering the DM should know all languages. I am very accustomed to more like southern accents, so like southern twang and southern dialect like howdy, well not howdy specifically, but like y'all, sugar, you know, stuff like that. To have somebody use howdy partner and try to make the most obnoxious character, that actually makes me kind of mad. What is the point of this? I speak multiple languages, but I'm not gonna suddenly start speaking all these languages while in a D&D session. What's the point of this? Right? Like, what is May doing? Why is she doing this? What's the point? Is it just for attention? It might be for attention, honestly. It seemed to me that she had a need to make the session about herself, so therefore I switched the NPCs around to not be very interested in her, which prompted her to create her kill list, where she wrote down the names of every NPC she planned to kill once she felt she leveled up enough if they slightly pissed her off. Now, keep in mind, she acted like a spoiled princess and would sass every character she met. I kind of know somebody like that, and man, that is insufferable. Oh, that's painful. I feel the pain come back inside my heart, dude. This is ow. Okay, let's get to the list and see how bad it gets. This list included, but not limited to, the only priest in the town they stayed in for daring to question her faith, the leader of a massive pirate organization and their main mission giver, no idea why, an NPC that had to deal with another player to heal their wings, which was a massive deal to said player. They were interested in what race she was. Other PCs, mainly the bard for some reason, didn't heal good enough, I guess. An entire village of lizard folk. They did not worship her upon seeing her. An NPC from another character backstory for beating her in a carnival game. Not everything in D&D has to be about you, alright? Like, I mean, the fun of D&D is everybody, players and the DM, make the story together. When you have one player that's the spotlight of everything, you know what it is? Everybody else is just a side quest companion and one person is the main quest. It's way more fun and fulfilling when there was character development and character relations and friendships and bonds being formed instead of just one character being like, hey, I'm the greatest, most interesting ever, and everybody gotta pay attention to me. That's what they call a Mary Sue, or I think the male version is Gary Stew. Regardless, when you're the main protagonist, the main character, it's like an anime plot. But May decided she wants to be the most important character there is. Now at this point, I'm sure you're wondering, why didn't we throw her out? And seeing all this listed up, I'm wondering myself. Sometimes hindsight is 20/20 and you feel like maybe you're making a breakthrough, maybe you're improving, and I can't blame the DM or the other players for, not getting rid of May immediately, because early on it doesn't seem so bad, but then you don't expect it to go topsy-turvy and get worse. But it doesn't stop there. May made it into her personal mission to make the bard as obsolete as possible, going as far as trying to take the skilled and skill expert feat to be as good in the same skills, trying to multiclass into paladin in order to remove the need for the healing the bard provided, and even trying to learn how to play music. This bitterness went so far as to make it a mission that was mentioned out of character that she wanted to talk with me to figure out a way to permanently curse the bard, which when I shot it down was changed to make the bard believe I cursed them. Now, there is something I didn't know where to mention, so I shall mention it here. May wrote her character's backstory, and oh so sweet Bahamut was in a backstory. So May's character was from the Feywild, had been banished from there by the Queen of the Summer Court for crimes against the Feywild. To give you a retelling I have in my head. May was born in a small village that after some time was attacked by someone in the Feywild. So far so good. Now this person was then completely destroyed by Kitsune. Never asked if I allowed this in the Feywild. The Kitsune left and May dies, but then revived when her wife puts her heart and entire blood vein system inside of May's body. Heart and blood vein system, how do you do that? Just like pulling just veins and stuff and just shoving it to somebody else's? How do you do that? What? This transfusion was done by a goddess, also demanded custom made by the way, and would make sure that May lived forever. This would lead to May going to the Kitsunes, becoming everyone's favorite ever, gaining levels, I suppose, and then conquering a massive area of the Feywild. This was very strange as the player kept insisting her character was from a small and unknown cult that at the same time was big enough that the Summer Court and its queen personally banished May to the material plane instead of just killing her. This backstory never reached to the banishment point, but over 6 chapters was planned. The player wrote all of this despite me saying to them very clearly that backstories are for when your character was at 0 to 3, and the feats and conquest in the backstory alone would have been impressive for level 14 character to pull off. But the players were all level 6. Yeah, the backstory is backstory. It's things that happened in the past. It's not things that are happening now. Like, okay, so let's say for example, right? My backstory as Morrow is that I grew up in the slums and I was really poor, and for survival's sake I learned how to become a fairly alright thief, do illegal activities, illegal stuff, and eventually picked up gambling. My backstory is I'm a gambler. That's my background, a gambler. And I like to gamble. I like cards. I like the risks, the reward, and that's how I made a lot of my money in the slums. My gambling screwed me over when a particular Aasimar artificer decided to scam me and offer up 200 gold for one thing that I thought was ridiculous. My soul. That soul was now sold to a succubus fiend, and that's how Morrow became a warlock. And that's it. But guess what? That part only describes how I became a warlock, but it doesn't tell the whole story. And it's specific enough to make sure that there is a dynamic already formed between the artificer, who is my best friend now, and myself, and this patron that I have now, the succubus. That's all it is. It's just a setup, and then you take from there. And then the DM has the ability to include things from a backstory or things that are related to a character and stuff for narrative reasons. And that's all it should be. That's all it should be. Short, sweet, maybe a few paragraphs, maybe at least a page and a half, 2 pages at most. It shouldn't be 6 chapters worth of story. How do you write chapters worth of backstory? It's backstory for crying out loud. Honestly, you could just summarize it in a few paragraphs at this point. Why you have to write 6 chapters of it? Now, outside the game, May was a bit of a snake, with being sugar sweet near me while harassing the bard every time she drove him home. This also came with love bombing the group by buying us snacks, dice, and drinks. So there was a lot of conflict. Eventually, one of my players reached out to her and asked her if she was willing to change, because as she was playing now was not comfortable. Her response was to say that she was uninvited by that specific player and leave. A final thing I'd like to mention that when she had a terrible habit of metagaming, in a sense she would look up the monsters I described with the excuse she wanted to see what they look like, as well as stating what she wants her fellow players to do out of character, going so far as to demand bardic inspiration in order to wrestle an NPC mentioned earlier. I get if you want to look up art, and I like to look at art, right? Like token art on Foundry, or just in general artwork that people on Twitter have put together of a specific monster or creature or being. But I mean, the least you can do is be polite enough to your DM and just not look up the monsters ahead of time. You've ruined the entire experience for yourself and for everybody else and for your DM, because the whole point is to give you a fun experience. If you already know what's going on ahead of time, it's like playing a video game for the very first time, but you watched an entire walkthrough of how the game is played, and you're just playing through it just to beat it quickly. Why? You're ruining the experience for yourself by looking stuff ahead of time. What's the point? Also, don't dictate what your other players should be doing. You can be like, hey gang, I could really use some help right now. I could use like a heal or like a thing. Or like, let's say for example, you do like a really bad saving throw and you say, ooh, could somebody help me with that? I'm really in a bad spot. But you don't make demands on what other people at the table do with their characters. Because guess what? They're their characters, not yours. And now, she's nothing but a memory for us. She cut off all contact with Sorcerer. Probably blocked us. I haven't bothered to check. TLDR, entitled player gets every accommodation from the DM and fellow players, but just keeps demanding more and more while gaslighting and playing the victim. If only May would actually listen and try to be cooperative and, you know, friendly, maybe things would have turned around, or maybe she would still be playing with the group. But you know what? At least she's gone, and hopefully y'all are having yourself a great time, OP. I wish you and your party all the best. And with that, that's going to be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales Tomorrow. Bye-bye.